How to Win Friends and Influence People. This is a guide to social relationships. Treat others as you wish to be treated. People truly care only about themselves. This will never change. People don't die from working too hard, but they do die from waste and worry. These words were first spoken by Dale Carnegie, the founder of modern interpersonal relationship education in the West, hailed as the greatest spiritual mentor and success guru of the 20th century. Carnegie grew up in poverty. Due to malnutrition, he was physically weak, wore short clothes with patches, and was often ridiculed by others. As a teenager, Carnegie desperately wanted to be a baseball hero, but lacking athletic ability, he could only watch from the sidelines. Later, he discovered that those who could speak and debate well also attracted attention, so he decided to pursue that path. However, Carnegie had no natural talent for public speaking. He entered 12 speaking competitions and failed each time, nearly driving him to suicide. On his 13th attempt, he finally won the school trophy, his first taste of success. This victory had a profound impact on his life. He was no longer the little boy clapping on the sidelines, but became a prominent figure in his school, town, America, and eventually worldwide. Carnegie was passionate about public speaking, using it to awaken the fighting spirit in countless lost souls and inspire them to succeed. Statistics show that Carnegie evaluated 150,000 speeches. To put this in perspective, in the 410 years after Columbus discovered America in 1492, he would have had to listen to at least one speech every day. Even if each speech was only 3 minutes long, these 150,000 speeches would require 10 straight months of nonstop, 24-hour listening. Later, he wrote various books sharing his years of experience to help more people achieve self-improvement. The most famous among these is How to Win Friends and Influence People. Though Carnegie was called a success guru, his influence wasn't fleeting but enduring. He was a master of human relations who didn't teach how to make money or become famous. His books contain neither motivational platitudes nor emotional manipulation, but rather step-by-step guidance on building better relationships. This book doesn't rely on slogans or grand statements, but provides practical guidance for action. Around 1925, the University of Chicago and the YMCA conducted a joint survey to determine what knowledge adults most wanted to learn. Survey results show that adults are most interested in health issues, followed by improving interpersonal skills. Based on these findings, the project manager decided to hire Dale Carnegie to conduct adult courses on interpersonal relationships in Connecticut. Why Carnegie? Since 1912, he had been dedicated to providing training courses for New York's business elite, accumulating rich experience and an excellent reputation. However, when Carnegie tried to find a practical guidebook on interpersonal relationships to use as teaching material, he couldn't find any. So he decided to write his own, essentially doing something that had never been done before and filling a gap in adult education. Carnegie helps us address interpersonal issues by focusing on common human weaknesses. How important are interpersonal skills? Back in the 1930s, the Carnegie Foundation discovered a pattern. Even in highly technical industries, only 15% of a person's success comes from technical skills, while 85% depends on personality traits and leadership abilities. This isn't hard to understand. Take the example of George Washington and Benedict Arnold during the American Revolution. Although Arnold was a brilliant military commander, his poor interpersonal skills and inability to build relationships ultimately led to his downfall, while Washington's superior diplomatic abilities and leadership helped him become the first president of the United States. Whether your work is business-related or not, everyone needs to handle interpersonal issues in daily life. Even parents need to manage relationships with their children effectively. You can't always resort to criticism and punishment when they make mistakes. While interpersonal skills are crucial, most of us don't aspire to become public speakers. We need techniques we can apply in our work and daily lives, preferably ones that work as quickly as a fast-acting medicine. How to Win Friends and Influence People addresses this core issue. How to quickly and effectively improve your interpersonal skills and become universally liked. Carnegie provides 3 principles for becoming well-liked, which we'll explore in detail. Let's look at Carnegie's first method, showing genuine interest in others. As one philosopher said, the deepest desire in human nature is to feel appreciated. This is spot on. You've surely seen people going to great lengths to attract attention. That's why we see people wearing inappropriate clothing just to stand out. But we all know this approach is problematic. Beyond thinking that's strange, you wouldn't give it a second thought. Why is this? Because in the past, present, and future, people are primarily concerned with themselves. Even if someone had a chicken foot growing from their head, people would just glance at it and think, "Why don't I have a chicken foot?" Here's a simple example. When you take a selfie with others, who do you look at first? When editing photos for social media, have you ever considered the people around you? A New York telephone company conducted a survey to find out which word was used most frequently in daily conversations. As you might have guessed, it was I. In the 500 phone calls they studied, this word was used 3,900 times. Everyone kept saying I. This is human nature. No matter how hard you try to make a good impression or spark interest in others, you won't make genuine friends this way. True friendship can't be forced through such methods. Carnegie greatly admired the famous Austrian psychologist Adler. Adler had a famous quote saying that a person who doesn't pay attention to others will inevitably face major setbacks in life and cause harm to others. Therefore, Carnegie teaches us that if you want to be popular, you must first learn to focus on others. What does it mean to focus on others? Let me share one of Carnegie's small habits. He would quietly remember his friends' birthdays. How did he do it? Although Carnegie wasn't particularly interested in zodiac signs, when chatting with others, he would ask if they believed in astrology and then smoothly transition to asking about their birthday. After learning the date, Carnegie would make a note of it and send them birthday wishes on their special day. Everyone was delighted to receive these greetings, and Carnegie made many close friends this way. You see, such a simple but thoughtful action made Carnegie more popular. If you can also pay attention to others like Carnegie did and make them feel valued in subtle ways, you'll surely gain more friendships too. Of course, focusing on others not only helps build friendships, but can also win clients for your company. Charlie, a student in Carnegie's training class, worked at a prestigious bank in New York. Once, while writing a research report about a company and interviewing its chairman, the secretary poked her head in to tell the chairman they were out of stamps. Seeing Charlie's confusion, the chairman explained that his 12-year-old son had recently become interested in stamp collecting. Charlie dismissed this information, thinking it was irrelevant. He proceeded with his questions, but the chairman kept avoiding direct answers and made small talk, clearly uninterested in the conversation. Charlie had to leave empty-handed. Later, when Charlie told Carnegie about this, Carnegie reminded him, "To get the chairman to tell you what you want to know, you need to first understand what he wants to hear. Your focus should be on his interests." But how can I know what someone wants to hear when I'm meeting them for the first time? Charlie suddenly remembered the secretary mentioning stamps and the chairman's son's interest in stamp collecting. He realized his bank's foreign affairs department received numerous letters from around the world daily. This was his breakthrough. The chairman was preoccupied with helping his son collect stamps. No wonder he wasn't interested in the interview. The next afternoon, Charlie visited the chairman again. This time, he asked the secretary to inform the chairman that he had brought many stamps for his son. The result? Charlie received a warm welcome, and the chairman happily showed him pictures of his son. They chatted enthusiastically for over an hour, and the chairman perfectly answered all of Charlie's questions, even providing unexpected information. Thus, Charlie succeeded by focusing on the other person's interests. Not only did she successfully complete her task and win a new client for the company, but she also made a new friend. There are many ways to show interest in others, and you don't always need to be talkative. Sometimes, listening is the best way to show you care. At a dinner party hosted by a New York publisher, Dale Carnegie met a botanist. Carnegie had never encountered a botanist before and had no knowledge of the field, so he couldn't engage in deep conversation. However, throughout the evening, Carnegie listened intently as the botanist talked about various plants and indoor gardens. After Carnegie left, the botanist praised him to the host, describing him as the most inspiring and engaging person he had ever met. Most engaging? That's ironic because Carnegie barely spoke all evening. He couldn't even if he wanted to, as he didn't know what to say. He did just one thing. He listened attentively, and that earned him high praise. You see, showing interest is the most subtle way to please others, and few can resist such undivided attention. Take family gatherings during holidays. for instance. Many people complain about being bombarded with questions and pressured about various things when they return home, to the point where they can't even fake a smile, earning them a reputation for being inconsiderate. Want to be that well-spoken child everyone admires? Carnegie suggests taking the initiative to show interest in your relatives' families before they start questioning you. After that, all you need to do is listen, and everything will be fine. Of course, Carnegie reminds us that our interest must be genuine. Sincerity is a fundamental principle in human relations. Only genuine interest can achieve the desired effect. Otherwise, you'll only backfire and be labeled as insincere and hypocritical. To summarize, the deepest desire in human nature is to feel valued by others. Therefore, Carnegie's first method for improving interpersonal skills is to show genuine interest in others. Now, let's look at the second method to become universally liked. If you want to change someone, start with praise. Human nature dictates that no one likes being ordered around. If you truly want to influence others, you must consider their perspective and motivate them through praise. In Carnegie's training class, there was a student named George, a safety manager at an engineering company. His job was to ensure everyone entering the construction site wore a safety helmet. Despite this being a basic safety requirement, people often ignored it. Whenever George saw someone without a helmet, he would assert his authority and order them to wear one. How did the workers respond? They would comply momentarily, but remove their helmets as soon as George left. Why did this happen? Wasn't George looking out for everyone's best interest? Yes, but no one likes being ordered around, even if it's for their own good. One time, while shopping at a secluded corner, on the wall, there was a prominent sign in red paint that read, "No public urination." Ironically, a few teenage boys were having a contest to see who could pee high enough to cover the warning sign. George's situation needed a solution, so Carnegie suggested a different approach. The next time he saw workers without hard hats, he could kindly ask if their helmets were uncomfortable or if they needed a different size. Then he could gently remind them, "The hard hat is for your protection. I suggest wearing it for your own safety." George was skeptical. Construction workers are tough guys. Who's going to listen to that? But he tried it anyway. Surprisingly, those who weren't wearing helmets gradually became more receptive. Since George was no longer giving orders from above, but showing genuine concern and making suggestions, people were more willing to comply. In the workplace, how would you handle a once excellent employee whose performance has declined? Would you scold or fire them? Neither approach is appropriate. Instead, you should use encouragement to change their behavior, rather than harsh criticism. Let's look at this example. Henry, a service manager at a truck dealership in Indiana, had a mechanic whose work quality was deteriorating. Previously, Henry would have yelled at him and fired him on the spot. But after attending Carnegie's training, Henry learned the principle of motivation through praise. He called the mechanic into his office, first praised his past achievements, then addressed the recent issues, and finally expressed his hope to see the return of the dedicated worker he once knew. The mechanic, not wanting to disappoint Henry's faith in him, worked hard to live up to that positive reputation. This is actually a classic approach. It's similar to how great leaders throughout history have handled challenging situations. Take Queen Elizabeth I's famous speech to her troops before the Spanish Armada. She didn't scold or cower. Instead, she began by saying, "I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and of a king of England too." Her words caught the soldiers off guard, but they immediately felt a sense of pride and belonging. She then spoke from their perspective, acknowledging their sacrifices and aspirations. You fight not just for crown and country, but for honor and glory. These powerful words struck a chord with every soldier. Finally, Elizabeth declared, "Your efforts will determine your rewards. You can become a nobleman, a high-ranking official, or even an earl with your own territory. Do you dare to strive for it? Can you achieve it?" At this point, everyone would naturally agree. Yes, we dare. We can do it. Who cares whether it's a man or woman sitting on the throne? We just want to win battles and earn rewards. Look at that. Without firing a single shot, a woman convinced thousands of soldiers with just her words. How? Because she could see things from their perspective and motivated them through praise. This aligns perfectly with Carnegie's principles. In the workplace, if you're a manager wanting to change company culture, try this. Just replace army with company, enlisting with joining, and fighting battles with working hard. And you can perfectly replicate this powerful technique. Think this only works in the workplace? It's effective in daily life too. Carnegie had a friend in New York who lived in a big house with a front lawn. She meticulously maintained her lawn, but neighborhood kids kept trampling it. She tried scolding them and reasoning with them, but nothing worked. Carnegie suggested she recruit the most mischievous child and give him an important job, to be a private detective protecting the lawn. The young detective felt important and regularly patrolled the area, stopping other kids from stepping on the grass. This completely solved her problem. This is Carnegie's second principle. Nobody likes being ordered around. If you want to change someone's behavior, consider their perspective and motivate them through praise. Sounds like a formula, right? Indeed, we all understand this principle. But Carnegie warns us not to be naive in thinking these methods will always succeed. In practice, we often get impatient, forget to praise, and resort to criticism and complaints instead. But criticism and complaints only damage your relationships because most people, regardless of their mistakes, rarely blame themselves or readily accept criticism. This is another weakness of human nature. That's why Carnegie offers a third method for improving interpersonal relationships. If you must criticize, do so with extreme caution. In fact, Carnegie advises against criticism altogether because of its destructive power. How destructive? The famous English novelist Thomas Hardy, author of Tess of the D'Urberville, almost gave up writing due to harsh criticism. Remember, criticism is like a boomerang. Criticism often comes back to hurt ourselves. People who are criticized tend to defend themselves and retaliate with equally harsh accusations. When Abraham Lincoln was a lawyer, he once anonymously published a letter in a newspaper mocking a local politician. This made the politician a laughingstock in town. Furious and humiliated, the politician did everything to find out who wrote the letter. When he discovered it was Lincoln, he immediately rode out to challenge him to a duel. If friends hadn't intervened in time, Lincoln might have died at the end of his opponent's sword. After this incident, Lincoln understood the most important principle of dealing with people, and he never criticized anyone again. Life is full of irony, though. The man who vowed never to criticize ended up being criticized by his wife for the rest of his life. Lincoln's greatest tragedy wasn't his assassination, it was his marriage. Throughout their 23 years together, Mary Todd Lincoln constantly found fault with him and was never satisfied with anything he did. She complained about his posture, his walking style, said his ears were ugly, his nose wasn't straight enough, his head was too small, his feet too big, and that he looked sickly. His wife's criticism and complaints caused Lincoln such distress that he would deliberately stay away from home for months, living in small country inns year after year. Similar stories abound. As Tolstoy said, all unhappy families are unhappy in their own way. Most of these unhappy situations stem from criticism and nagging. If you want a happy marriage, remember, don't criticize. But how can ordinary people resist criticizing others? To minimize the negative impact of criticism, most people use a technique of praising before criticizing. When I was in school, my mother would try to correct my carelessness by saying, "Honey, you did really well on this test. I'm proud of you. But if you could spend more time on algebra, it would be even better." My mother thought this approach showed her nurturing side, and initially, I responded well to it. However, eventually, whenever she said, "I'm proud of you," I would deflate like a balloon, knowing it was just setting up for criticism. This approach made even the praise seem insincere and was unlikely to change my study habits. Dale Carnegie taught us that changing just one word could solve everything. Which word? Replace but with and. Let's feel the difference. Honey, we're really proud of your grades this term. And if you keep up this great attitude toward studying, your algebra grades will improve too. This way, we can genuinely feel the parents' praise, and their educational goal is achieved. The highest form of criticism is no criticism at all, in other words, tolerance. Hoover was a famous aerobatic pilot who once experienced engine failure in both engines at 300 feet. Fortunately, his quick thinking allowed him to parachute to safety, avoiding any casualties. Though the expensive aircraft was completely destroyed, Hoover's first action after landing was to check the plane's fuel tanks. Upon inspection, they discovered that the propeller aircraft was filled with jet fuel. Clearly, this was a mistake made by the maintenance mechanic. We can imagine Hoover's feelings at that moment. This foolish error could have cost 3 lives. While he had every right to criticize the careless worker, Hoover did something different. Instead, he put his arm around the mechanic's shoulders and said, "To prove you won't make this mistake again, I'd like you to service my F-51 tomorrow." Faced with such a response, the mechanic must have been deeply moved and would surely never make the same mistake again. This illustrates Carnegie's third principle for improving interpersonal relationships. Avoid criticism if possible, and when criticism is necessary, do it with extreme care. How to Win Friends and Influence People focuses on effectively improving social skills and becoming universally liked. Carnegie presents 3 key methods based on human nature. First, the deepest desire in human nature is to feel important. If you want to make more friends and be well-liked, start showing genuine interest in others. Second, no one likes being ordered around. If you want to influence others, consider their perspective and motivate them through praise. Third, most people, regardless of their mistakes or their severity, rarely blame themselves and rarely accept criticism gracefully. Therefore, if criticism is necessary, it must be handled with great care. This book isn't about teaching knowledge. It's about developing new habits and trying different behavioral approaches. This requires time, persistence, and active practice in daily life. George Bernard Shaw once said, "People can't be taught." So, let's treat this book as a personal handbook. When you need to persuade someone, don't give in to your instinctive reactions, which are often wrong. Instead, remember Carnegie's methods and try to apply them, and see what results you achieve.